Welcome everyone to our first What the Fuck Friday Facts with Perry Venakis. Perry, thank you for coming back.
Ladies, it's good to see you both again. And yes, what the fuck? It's going to be a great episode. I think tonight I must admit, you girls have picked a very, very interesting topic to discuss, analyze, and exploit for tonight's show. So
we just really threw one big one at you, didn't we?
Oh, yeah. I didn't expect it at all. When I got the email, I'm like, what? You want me to find what? Right, so
it's a hot topic at the moment in all sports, isn't it? So looking at whether there's a competitive advantage to transgenders participating in women's sport, and for us being bodybuilders and figure bodybuilders, we're like, well, it's only a matter of time if it's not already happening. And then do those people that present as transgenders then have a competitive advantage against us biological women that are on stage? So we wanted to take the emotion out of it, Perry. We wanted to get, all that hype up, it's wrong, it's this, it's not ethical, and just talk pure science. And if there's anyone that knows pure science and the anatomy and how the human body is put together, it's you. This is your specialty, has been for 35 years. So that's why we wanted to address this now at the forefront, because it's only a matter of time. So it's going to be, we're going to be able to inform our listeners, educate them as well, and hopefully this will have a bit of a ripple effect and get to some of the the people that need to hear it.
Cool. All right. Well, basically, I suppose you threw me in the deep end to find some information. It was the old story of the more I read, the more I found, and it was quite interesting to see that the research papers that study the scientific implications of people that are transgendering, etc., that there's new information coming up, and they're also making it very clear that we need to find more information, because it's it's just a new topic that's come up, and people have gone, right, let's get onto this and go from there. Especially the British Medical Journal of Sports Science. They have really delved into this quite deeply and have put up some quite interesting studies. And I've listed some of the papers if anyone wants to see them later on, if they want to have an in-depth read. But it's basically, we're trying to look at whether there is an advantage to being a transgender in a specific sport. And the specific sport that we're talking about tonight is figure bodybuilding. I think that's the best way. We need to clarify it, because we don't know what sport we're going to be talking about. There are different variances. So for tonight's discussion, it's basically the science behind transgenders in a female figure competition and what the implications are, and if there are any advantages or what the differences are. So it's become such a big topic for me to read. I've had to take notes, which I'll be referring to tonight. So you see my head duck down, I'm just reading again, but I just want to make it very clear, because for me, it become a very interesting topic and something that I've sort of brushed off a bit because I haven't worried about it. But when you ladies asked me to have a bit of a discussion about it, I started reading into it and it just pricked my ears up, and very fascinated with what I learned, and I'm looking forward to sharing it with everyone. So I'll start off in the beginning. Or what we're going to talk about is what's the difference between a male and a female. I'm going to talk about when I was born in the 1960s, how it was described. It was simple. You're born, you've got a penis, you're a man. You've got a vagina, you're a woman. So for the topic for tonight, to make it easy for people to understand, when I say male or female, that's what I'm talking about. So I'm not being biased or controversial or anything like that. I'm just using it from my opinion so that there's clarity and easy for people to understand. So that's the first point. When we look at chromosome coding for male and females, and this comes from me when I did my applied biology at RMIT University. One of the areas I was really passionate about was genetics. I was very fascinated with how that works, and the other one was microbiology. But genetics was a big thing. So to see the advances in genetics and the analysis of chromosome structure, it blew my mind. And the interesting thing is that we know that female chromosomes are XX and male are XY, and there's 23 paired chromosomes. So that creates the basic foundation. But there are also sometimes situations in life, like anything in nature, whether it be plants, whether it be animals, whether it be humans, that we get, well, like that little animal there, that there is a small variance or a genetics dysfunction or disease or manipulation of the genetic makeup. When that translocation occurs, it changes things. So one of the ones that I found here is a disease called, or a syndrome called Klinefelter syndrome. and it's termed as 47XXY. And the reason why I'm bringing this one up is because it correlates a lot with the topic that we're on to tonight, is that this genetic dysfunctional mutation or adaptation is basically regarded as a person that's born as a transgender, because they're born as a biological male, and later on in life, when they start to find they're having, testicular atrophy, they're struggling to get an erection, they're starting to find that their body is changing, they're starting to accumulate gynecomastia, like man boobs, their hair disposition starts to change on their body, and they get tested later on in life, they find that they've got this chromosome, and even body structure change. So they get really long arms, really long legs, and they start to become this lanky sort of human, and they're the people that are termed as born as transgender. What the interesting thing is, though, this is only between 0.02 to 0.2% of the populace in the world. So it's quite rare. It's really, really rare, but it does exist. So we need to identify that and just go, all right, there's X and Y. It's not black and white. Anything that we find is not black and white. So when we understand that, we go, cool, here's the differences of what we've got. And here's I would say a genetic adaptation or mutation, whatever you want to call it, that falls outside the realm. And we see that they've got the born as a transgender. That's what the syndrome is all about. The next part I want to talk about is that when we identify someone as a female at birth, as a biological female, what we look at is the fact that they've got a vagina and a uterus, right? And a uterus means that they can carry a baby, give birth, right? So when we look at that, we need to be able to clear that, when some people say they identify as a female, whatever, well, the biological status is, well, you might identify as a female, but can you have a baby, right? So that's where I like to look, that's just my opinion on this. I know there's another big topic on this altogether. But again, once again, we've got another situation here. It's called the MRKH syndrome. And that's a woman that's born without a uterus or very, very small uterus that can't have a baby. Or their vaginal structure is very different or small or minute. They can't have a period, nothing. So again, I'm trying to show that, there's no black and white here. We can't say, well, this lady doesn't have a uterus when she was born, so she's not a female. What is she? Well, she is a female, but there's a mutation or adaptation that's happened to this person. So that's one thing I want to make very, very clear. So we understand that we've got chromosomes X and Y and X and X, but there's also little variances that occur. And there's a lot more. There is a lot more. But for this topic tonight, these are the ones I want to look at.
Like looking at someone with like either no uterus or a very small uterus or a hypo uterus, that almost be like like a defect, like with Kai with his heart, he's got a hypo heart, it's a smaller heart than normal, he's got half a heart. So have they classified it as a defect or actually classified it as a condition?
Well, they classify it as a syndrome.
Syndrome.
So so they classify it as a syndrome. And then again, that's what I'm saying. It's either a genetic adaptation or mutation or something's gone right, and that falls out of the realm of the XX chromosome, right? So, and then something's gone wrong with their development, and they just don't have a uterus. So it's a syndrome, and it happens. So I need to clarify that as well, because you might be born as a female, but you've got this syndrome, and they go, well, you haven't got a uterus, you can't have a baby, you're not a female, but you are. You might still have a vagina, you might still have breasts, etc. So again, there's that little bit of the realm on the outside that we need to understand. So now let's look at it from another perspective. Let's say we've got a normal male, normal female, right? Biological male and female, they've been born, they're growing up, etc. What are the differences? And I'm going to be looking at just basically muscular development, right? We know for a fact that in the general populace, right, trained or untrained athletes, men are usually stronger, men are usually faster, men are leaner than women, full stop, right? We know that. And when we look at the architecture of the human body, of comparing a male to a female will have bigger pecs, bigger traps, as compared to a female. That's given. The upper body muscularity is always bigger. The thing, even the dog agrees. So bearing that in mind, we understand that that's the thing. The other thing too, the contractual force and the strength from males is always great, right? They're always a lot stronger, and therefore they're going to develop a lot quicker than a female. What's interesting is though, a female, sit down, dog, a female will fatigue later than a male, right? And will recover better than a male, and will recover better to exercise stimulus and let's say fatigue better than a male. So when we're training a woman, we can actually train a woman with a bit more volume but not as much weight. And you'll find that they'll recover better and they'll grow better and they'll adapt better to the new stimuli, right? So we need to understand that. There's also a difference is, let me think of this, it's called fascicle length. And the fascicle length develops during puberty and also during training. So the fascicle length means, the muscle length, the amount of myofibrils we can have in there, but the radial hypertrophy we can have. So when we look at muscle mass on a man, it's always bigger than a woman, right? Because of the things that happen during puberty, men are getting more testosterone and androgenic response as compared to a female. So when we understand that, we can say, right, this makes sense why men are stronger, men are faster, men have got more muscle bulk, right? So that's the one thing that we need to look at. One of the key things though that we're discovering now, that because we thought it was, years ago, it was just black and white, men, women, etc. We're now realizing that there's over 3,000 genes that alter the expression of the muscle between a male and a female. Not one or two, not three, over 3,000. And there's many studies that show that. So it's mind-boggling to see how far science has come along with all this information. And, like I said, I went down, as Rose was saying before, down a rabbit hole with all this, just reading and writing and going, this is bloody great. So, I've been loving this. The other thing too, what we're finding is that the physiological adaptations of these has come from thyroid function, from testosterone and estrogen, the ratios in between. And again, that happens during puberty. So,
Right.
you see, so we've got, when we look at a male and we look at a female, we start to get these changes that are happening. And as we grow, and we talk in general population, so I'm not talking extreme, because I know there's some women out there that'll shit all over me in strength. My old client, Vesna, for example, she'd do a bicep curl, her arms are bigger than mine. And she's natural, and she's just genetically gifted. She's taller than me, she's just a genetic freak. But that's an extreme. When we look at the general populace or the general training, you go for fitness first, let's say, and you look at the women in there and look at the men in there, the men are always going to look more muscular, etc. And these are the reasons why. So we need to understand that. And this is going to set the foundation for what I'm going to talk about later on. So what we want to do is, now we know that men and women look different. Men and women have got different muscularity. I want to talk about the differences between someone that identifies as a female as compared to one that's going to transgender. Someone that identifies as a female is just a guy that's decided that for whatever reason, whether, I'm not even going to get into this, for whatever reason, they've decided they want to be a female. So put some lippy on a skirt, whatever, and they're going to say, my name's not John anymore, I'm now Joanne. And that's it. So they've done, there's no pharmacology, there's no, let's say, medical intervention, there's no surgical intervention. To change that person.
Through puberty, they've gone through puberty, they've progressed, I guess, through their life journey as a male up until that point that they then, for whatever reason, decide that they are going to identify as a female.
Yeah, and that's fine. If that's what they want to identify as a female, that's fine. What are we going to say?
Changes that they make are only purely cosmetic.
Yeah, so it's cosmetic. Yeah.
So that's the difference. So we need to understand that. Whereas a transgender, what they will do is they will actually take a pharmacological approach or a surgical approach to move on from identifying as a female to transgendering to a female. So that there needs to be that clarity, because what happens is this: if you've got someone that identifies as a female and walks in with a beard and a singlet and does a powerlifting comp like we saw just recently and smashes all the world record in the female powerlifting, and then turns around and says, oh, I've changed my mind, I'm going to be a man again, but walked in there with a beard and a mustache and wearing a male singlet just to prove a point of the stupidity of that sport in that division. So that's someone that identified as a female, right? No changes whatsoever. As a transgender, they're going to take a different protocol and a different methodology. So they identify as a female, but they're doing something about it on a physiological level, right? Anthropedically, they're going to change their body. So the process is called gender-affirming hormone therapy, called GAT in short, right? With GAT, there are 3 different levels that people take on board. The easiest one is just basically take estrogen, right? To take it either sublingually, as a tablet, as a liposomal cream. You can inject, you can do whatever you want. And you're going to get the secondary sexual characteristics, female characteristics are going to occur. So soft skin, loss of muscle mass, weak. All the changes happen. There's going to be erectile dysfunction. Some guys find that they have complete testicular atrophy. They definitely have erectile dysfunction. It's like it's game over in that respect. So that's one process. The other one is they take an anti-androgen process. So I think I've just written it down. I think I've written it down. It's called flutamide is one of the medications they take. And what flutamide does is the way it works is that these people that are transgending and still have the testicles, right? It's called auriculoepy, what it's called, where they remove the testicles. They still got either one or both testicles on there, so the body's still making testosterone. So by taking this anti-androgen, what it does is it blocks the receptor, so they can't absorb the testosterone. So that means that their estrogen levels are coming high, and if they're taking estrogen tablets as well, we're going to see that. But usually they'll just take the anti-androgen and it shuts down their production. The next step is to take a thing called Lupron, which is a GnRH agonistic approach, which means what this does is this actually shuts down the production of testosterone in the body, right? They inject every, I think, 1 or 2 months. Quite an expensive process. It's meant to be a lot of money, and a lot of medical fraternities will not cover it under insurance or the change. They go, you can do everything else while you're doing this, basically. So that's there. But it's interesting. The effects of either one of these three, it's still the same. There's still going to be testicular atrophy. There's still going to be a loss of lean muscle mass. There's still going to be change in body fat distribution in the body, and there's still going to be, the psychological effects that happen with all of this. So that's a very, very important thing. So they're going to be changing. They're actually transgendering. What we're finding is, though, and this is the interesting thing, when we look at the physiology now of someone that's decided to transgender, the first thing that we notice is that their red blood cell, the hemoglobin count, drops right down, and it becomes exactly the same as a female. And that's been documented over and over again. There's still a lot of research to study the implications of that, because theoretically, if you've got a low hemoglobin count, your oxygen transfer through the blood is going to reduce, etc. So therefore, you should feel weaker and not be the same function male that you were. But blood volume isn't decreased. We're just talking about the hemoglobin count has been reduced. So that's one thing we need to clarify, because some people thought that because their hemoglobin count's gone down, they've actually got less blood volume, so they're smaller. And that's not the case, right? So that's the thing. What's interesting, though, they're going to lose lean muscle mass, and they're going to get a little bit more fat distribution. Their strength's going to drop off. But here's the scary thing. When we compare that to a female in exactly the same situation, 3 years down the track of treatment, they are still at a substantial advantage over a female.
Yeah.
We're not talking a little bit, we're talking a lot. We're talking there is a massive difference between a male and a female, or sorry, a transgender and a female. And that's the point that needs to be clarified, right? That's what we need to understand and why this is happening. So the concept is why is this? Why do we find there's such a big difference? One, the fascicle length, one thing. Secondly, during puberty, what's happening is that development then sets the foundation and the basis of extra muscle, extra growth, extra strength, etc. And then when it's diminished, it's only dropped that much. So what we're finding is here, and what's interesting, is the effects of testosterone on hypertrophy and the effects of estrogen on hypertrophy. So what we're finding is that estrogen bluntens the effect of hypertrophy on the muscle. It'll knock it down a little bit, so you won't grow as much. But testosterone level can be next to zero. And if you've got someone that trains, they can still grow. And the perfect example is one, if you've got a normal male that's got some sort of genetic dysfunction, their testes are not working right, their testosterone levels are next to zero, which we find a lot of guys are at, or women that naturally have very, very low to zero testosterone levels, when these two people decide to go into the gym, both male and female, and they hit the gym, what do we see? Muscle growth.
Yeah.
They grow.
Yeah,
So
they grow.
So what's testosterone got to do with it? It's a small part. It will affect growth. Of course it will. We know that taking high levels of testosterone, what it does to both men and women. And what we're looking at is the negated effect of testosterone on muscle hypertrophy and what can happen. So if you've now got...
Right, that blows up. Yeah, we need to spend a second on that. That's new for me too. I remember reading something, but you explained it just then because I didn't know what it meant when I was reading it. And I'm like, Oh my God, you just explained that so well.
I'm glad it got through.
That's crazy, you know, and it explains why, you know, some of my other clients that I work with that, you know, like I've only got natural competitors that I'm working with, you know, predominantly at the moment as well, have next to no test, you know, like 0.2, you know, when the range is like up to like 2 or what have you, and they're just exploding, they're just growing. And you know, we're not giving them extra hormones, you know, we're not on supplements or anything like that, you know.
So testosterone not being the only factor is sorry, Perry was just, for those listening, Perry was just letting his little puppy know that he needs to behave. But you know, I think that from what I'm reading on this topic, it is a very emotive topic for many people, and they will purely come back to testosterone being the only determining factor. Well, if these people are bringing their test levels down to levels of female, they should be allowed. But as you've said, it really doesn't paint the whole picture. That has nothing to do with it.
I'll give you something else to think about. So now you've got a male, a genetic male, genetically born biological male that's decided over the years that they're going to be training, and they're training hard, and they're growing, and they're growing, and they're growing. And later on in life, they go, I'm now going to transition. That person there has such a bigger advantage again because they've grown more muscle. And you know, the old theory of muscle memory, satellite cells, etc. Some people have disputed that. They said it doesn't exist. There's no muscle memory. Other people believe in this, right? But when we look at it, when we look at the myosin contractile forces, for anyone that trains, that will always remain. You'll always have that strength, that muscle strength. The other thing too, satellite cells, even when you lose muscle mass, the satellite cells are there, so you can still grow. So even though they're not growing as much because there's a lack of testosterone, even though they're not growing as much because they're elevated estrogen, and we know that estrogen blunts the effect of hypertrophy, they're still going to grow. They're still going to have an advantage. So you've got someone that starts off as a male. Let's say we're looking at muscle mass here. Then it's going to drop down to here because they've transgendered. But then they're training again. They're going to put it up here. Whereas a woman starts here and then slowly tries to build up. They're at an advantage all the way through. And even if they haven't trained, what happens at puberty will affect their muscle density, performance, everything. It's completely because they're men. They're boys turning to men, and their hormonal profile, thyroid function will affect what happens to that muscle. And it creates a baseline. It creates a structure for this person to grow. Because
is that like, just for those that don't know what a satellite cell is as well, can you explain that?
Yeah, satellite cells are little, let's say, dots within the muscle that's generated during hypertrophy. So the more satellite cells you have, the more case of hypertrophy, to make it easy for people to understand. So when we lose muscle, let's say you've been sick or you've decided to stop training or you're transgendering, whatever, what the theory is that we don't lose those satellite cells. So let's say you start off with 10 as an untrained human, you then train, you've got 30, so that's going to create the growth. Then you stop training, that 30 will still be there. They won't disappear. So like therefore, yes. Yeah.
Right.
And it's a theory. It's not, it's some people have actually defunct this. They actually believe that doesn't happen. You know, but you know, when we look at the practicality, I know that when I stop training through injury and then I go back to training, I'll build back up again. I'll go back to my normal weight. I'll go back to my same structure and strength. Right. So, you know, it's a tricky one. But the point is this, when we're looking at it from a transgender's point of view and someone that's developing, even if they haven't trained, they're at an advantage. And if they have trained, they're at a bigger advantage. So then that gap gets bigger and bigger and bigger. And that's what we've got to look into here. Now, here's the other thing. So now we've got someone that's transgender to go into a female figure sport, right? That's what we're talking about. If the female sport is a natural federation, theoretically, these women are not taking anything, right? They're taking creatine. Let's use that as an example, okay?
Yes.
So they're trying to grow.
Yeah, because if the same, I guess, because in a natural, you know, in a tested league, then you're not to take anything. Estrogen, testosterone, nothing. It's all ped free. So technically, these people would have to be not going down the GAT road.
No.
Right?
So,
is that right? Or have I missed?
In a national federation, I know of people that have produced medical documentation, men that have had zero testosterone, and had to take testosterone to bring their levels up to a standard level. And they presented the document and said, now I'm taking gear, but look at my levels there. We're within normal range. So therefore I should be able to compete in a national comp. And there was a lot of controversy over that, but it made sense, right? It's the same now with someone that's on a GAT protocol. They're lowering their testosterone levels to next to zero. So they're female. They're basically a female. So they're going to go into this female sport. But the muscular adaptation and size and performance, etc., is still an advantage. So the women can't catch it. So now let's turn it around. Let's pull the string the other way. Let's now look at a figure competition that allows the use of pets, right? So now you've got a woman that's gone, I'm now going to, here's a man up here that's transgendered, and this is the muscle mass they've got. I'm going to bump myself up to get up to here, right? So now we're at a level playing field. Should they compete together? Well, let's have a look at this female. Enlarged clitoris, loss of hair, broken voice, no possibility of having a period whatsoever, possible long-term damage internally.
Infertility.
So you basically transform yourself, you've transgendered into a man to compete at a figure level at that extreme. You know, I look at people like, you know, without, you know, putting anyone down, like, I'm fascinated by what a female body can do. Iris Cole comes to mind all the time. When I met her personally, excuse me, I couldn't believe her muscle density and strength and what I'm like, whoa, that was crazy for me. But that is an extreme person at an extreme sport at an extreme level. So when we look at figure competitions here in Australia, we don't really have many people that are that genetically gifted and that extreme and thing. But we also do know there are some girls here, and I'm not going to mention names. When you talk to them, it's like, oh, I've got a cold. No, you don't. And what's the bulge down there? That's a very enlarged clitoris, you know, and you look at their muscular dysmorphia that's changed. They're built like a man. So, you know, when we look at that, you just go, where's the string? Where are we going to pull the string? So I look at it this way. I'm going to look at it from a simple, straightforward point of view rather than pulling that into the playing field. Is a transgender at an advantage coming into a female figure sport? The science shows 110% they are. They're at an advantage no matter what you say, do whatever. They are at an advantage. Muscularity, muscle denseness, you know, speed, performance, etc. All that sort of stuff that is greater than any female could ever be. And even though their estrogen levels are, let's say, similar to a female, and their testosterone levels are low and similar to a female, their adaptation and what happens to them physiologically will always surpass that of a natural female, a biologically born female. There it is.
Oh my God. That was so good. Oh, my brain is blown because that was just such a great, I guess, you know, like scientific view of male, female, the crossovers. And then coming out at the end of like, okay, well, is there an advantage? And I think most people just think testosterone. And then I have been asked that question, Perry, from many people. But there's girls that take testosterone in your league and they're taking things. So it's a level playing field. So that just, thank you, because that just really honed in on it.
So what that's saying is that, no, it's not. Even if you're taking the gear, even if you're enhanced as a woman, there are those other factors that Perry presented that show that the man, or sorry, I should say the transgender, is still at an advantage and a significant one at that.
And here's an interesting one. If they've only taken estrogen therapy, if they've only gone down the estrogen pathway and they've changed everything, they've got testicular atrophy, erectile dysfunction, all that stuff, right? That's fully reversible. They can go right back. They can become a man again if they go, you know what, I've had enough of wearing a skirt. I'm out. I want to become a man again. They can change it around.
So they can
change it around. But a female that's abused their body, turn it back, there are many cases that they can't turn it back. They've done that permanent damage. Yeah, permanent damage. It's done. It's like you've pushed the envelope that hard that you've created permanent damage, and that's sad to see. I mean, look, it's today's society the way it is. Like the girl I'm talking about. I'm not going to mention her name here, but she's promoting peg use for women, and you should take this and that and inject that and swallow this and shove this up your butt. And I'm like, who the hell are you to just talk like this about illegal substances and making it sound that, we've got this whole packet of lollies. I'm going to take these lollies here, these lollies there, inject that, shaft that. And yes, and when you look at this person, they look like a man, they sound like a man, and you consider the damage they've got is irreversible. They're gone. And if they're talking at that level of what they can administer for a female, I mean, this is a topic for another day. This is another what the fuck
That is
Friday.
I mean, in fact, we said we were going to have that as a what the fuck moment, and I look, I'm under the personal opinion where you have people that are like that in the industry. Like, how is that being policed? Like, it is illegal what they're doing, saying, hey, yes, I would start on a T3 cycle and then, do this and then do that and take 60 milligrams of Anavar and what have you. I'm like, well, where are your credentials and why are you saying this on a forum where you haven't even got any, you're generally speaking, and you're talking about someone's intricate, biology and chemistry. You can't be saying and giving doses and what randoms when you don't even know who the person is in front of you and you are legally not allowed to do so.
Yeah. So, I mean, I look at my qualifications to be able to talk about what I've spoken about tonight, and everything's referenced scientifically. Like, there's no bias in here. You want to be a transgender, fine. And I'm just talking about the advantages and disadvantages in the sport, and it's female figure sport. That's it. And when you talk about stuff like this, if you make a statement and you come back it scientifically with the latest information and from a credible source, because I can find you papers that'll go completely against everything that I've said tonight. Easy. But the source where it comes from is shit. Or the way that the let's say analysis and structure of the paper, the randomized control trial or whatever it might be, has not been done with the correct ethics and the correct non-biased approach. So
often too, people don't read, people will read a research article too. And I noticed this in the last couple of years. They've gotten very good at pulling out one little statistical significant thing, but then not mentioning the many limitations of the study.
Here's the other thing too, Rose. A lot of these people don't know how to look for the gaps in the research, which is the limitations you're talking about.
Absolutely.
So if you've got 3 people that conducted an experiment,
and that's what I noticed when I was actually because I was trying to read, I guess, the argument, and then I was trying to read things again. Every research article that I read for the 4, there was no science behind it. There was literally none. I really was trying to find it. I was looking at the footnotes of every article on BBC, and I was looking for why do you think this is fair? I'm okay, you can say that, but show me how. Yeah. And all I could find was the stuff that you're talking about by reputable science journals that are, the UK, the
British Medical Journal of Sport.
Yeah. I mean, that's top of the line. So that's what I've tried to encourage people to do too. Look, you can find a dozen research articles, make sure they're from a reputable source, because people have published a lot of research that should never have gotten there. There's a lot of money wrapped up in research behind the scenes. My own university days and having gone through university and then getting out on the other side, you start to realize that, research grants and things like that, it's a very complicated process. And sometimes things are funded to find a certain thing. So this is the reality. And a lot of people don't understand that haven't kind of, either had anything to do with academia or haven't known much about it. But it is the truth. So yeah, that is so good to hear. And, interestingly enough too, there is a transgender bodybuilding association. So
fill me in, let me know. Tell me all about it. I haven't heard anything about this at all.
Lisa's got the link up.
I'm going to put it, I'm going to send it, and put it in the chat notes, but this is it here. Okay.
Now, sorry. Now, let me understand. Are the 2 guys there? Are they transgenders? Are they?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. And when I looked on their site, they actually, the first year or so, they actually allowed male to female and female to male to actually compete together on the same stage. But I think they've gotten a little more popular now. I think they've been going for, I think it was like 5 years or something. They've been around a while. So, I mean, there is options.
Well, there you go. And I mean, well, now we're talking about the fairness in the sport, like the old story, stay in your lane.
Yeah, look, if you're going to go down that journey and that's how you want to identify, that's the how you want to live your life. Everything has pros and cons and sacrifices and what have you, so you've got to take that into consideration as well. And then, I think this is me being, not scientific, but as a woman in a sport that I've participated in for like 20 years, I know what I'm going up against. I know I'm going up against girls in figure with a whole lot of different biology, but essentially we are women, okay? And, yes, there are assisted, there are, natural athletes, but we signed up for that.
Yeah, we know what we're getting into.
We know what we're getting in for,
And we're okay with it.
Yeah, but I don't want to be compared to a transgender because for me, obviously with what you've said, Perry, but it's not even playing field.
It's not fair. I mean, it's about fairness, and that's what I've been trying to get across to people. Let's take the emotion out and let's think about the science. Thankfully at the moment, there is more research coming out, Perry, and they are moving more towards, such as the International Association of Athletics have just banned males who have gone through puberty and then transitioned from competing with women. And that is because that is fair, because they do have an advantage. It's been scientifically proven. They've got a whole range of research that they list underneath that decision. And I guess from a bit of a women's rights kind of perspective for myself, because I'm a bit of a social scientist and I studied psychology and I love looking at, I guess, society as a whole. Women fought for even a place in the sporting world for years. We were not allowed to compete in the Olympics. Sport wasn't allowed. We weren't allowed to compete in sports. That's why, if you actually understand the history of women's sport, it became a protected category so that we could have a fair playing field. And that otherwise, this is a statistic, without it, the best 3,000 athletes in track and field in the whole world right now would be all male. So we wouldn't even get a look in if we didn't have a protected category.
Yeah.
And it's about fairness. It's not about we don't like those people or this. Women have been discriminated against and have fought for our rights for millennia. We only got the right to vote, for goodness sakes, back in the, in the 60s, wasn't it? Or something like, I can't even remember the year. But I mean, when you think about it, like we know what discrimination is too. And that's why we're going to fight to protect our protected sports categories, because it's fair. And that's all that I care about. I like the idea that the International Transgender Bodybuilding Association exists. I think that's great.
I think we should actually put that up as well. Like, we'll definitely have that, and we're also open.
You didn't have a talk with them.
Yeah. I mean, I'm sorry if that sounded like a bit of a feministic rant, but yeah, when you look at the history of where women have come from and how hard we fought to have to be able to enter sport and to compete internationally. And, we've still got a long way to go in a lot of sports to get women to where men are.
Well, I think that, sorry, Lisa, go.
I was just going to say, all you've got to do is, look at the Mr. Olympia and then the prize money difference between, Sydney, what was his name, that one? Huddy, I think.
Paddy Chopin.
Yeah, you know, like it's like $250,000 or whatever it is versus 50,000. So we're still the minority in terms of like we're not playing equal. We're not.
Yeah, we're not getting the pay. I mean, look, the women's soccer team in Italy isn't going to be getting the amount of money and support that the male one is, or the recognition and things like that. And you know, I'm not saying that that's all bad, but I'm just saying we've come from a place where we did have to fight to get into the sport. And when even male, you know, even when bodybuilding began, you'd know this, Perry, that we didn't have nearly as many categories for women, you know, even a few years ago.
In bodybuilding.
Yeah, that, you know, so we're still on the forefront and pioneering for our sport, and you know, the league has been amazing in recognizing the women in the sport and you know, creating more categories and things like that, and that's the right direction. So
really interesting, Rose, on that note, is that we were speaking to Whitney Jones last week, and she's like, do you know what the 66 stands for in FemFlex Friday? And I'm like, no, I don't. And Rose is like, no, because I was always curious about the 66. And then
I'm thinking Route 66 or some, you know, that highway, like.
Whitney goes, 66% of bodybuilders are made up of females. So over 50% of bodybuilders collectively are actually women in this sport.
There you go.
Today.
And I mean, I think the advent of the bikini classes had a big impact on that, because you get more girls that it's easier to transition to bikini, whereas you girls, you know yourself, it's a lot of hard work to be in figure. And look, I think in concept of the conversation tonight, that grey line of transgender into figure, I think after tonight's conversation, that grey line now has just been wiped. We know that a transgender in a figure competition is just a complete advantage over a genetically born female that has maintained her female structure and physique and, you know, morphology all the way through till now where they're competing. And if someone decides to step in and change into a transgender, then yes, I think it's very, very clear. Science makes it very clear that there is a definite advantage, and it's very unfair for women, like you're saying, for someone's been fighting to hold the sport together, all of a sudden going to get taken away because men can come in. It doesn't make sense to me at all either. But the interesting thing is too, that because this has only just started, and it's been the papers that have been around only a few years, like I think the B&J one was 2021, and I make it clear that due to this severe increase and change and more public acceptance of what's happening, that more research and study needs to be done. And what's interesting for the scientists, they're now trying to look at the adaptations of transgenders and what's happening to their muscular mass over a longer period of time. So, you know, we're only been doing this 2, 3, 4, 5 years. That's how long the papers are. It's going to be just seeing 10 years where they're at. Because right now we know that if you transgender today, 3 years later, you still got a shitload more muscle than a female.
Yeah,
it's incredible. 3 years later, I've been completely suppressed of your testosterone. You're still at a bigger advantage than a female. That blew me away when I read that.
Yeah, it blew me away. Yeah, and it blew me away too, because that was actually one of the reasons why the International Athletics Association changed their ruling, because they found that. Because prior to that, a person only needed to identify as female and keep their testosterone levels below under 5 mg per whatever. How do you say that actually?
Nanomole.
Like
nanomole. Nanomoles. Yeah. So under 5 for 1 year. Now they have to be under 2.5, but only for 1 year. And again, slippery slope. And they did, again, they've said that for that reason though, that they were banning any male to female transgender identifying people that had been through puberty. So this is from an International Athletics Association, and of course, you know, you've got the people, you know, referring to them as bigots. But as you've said, the science is really clear. It's so clear. It's right there. And they also cited, I don't know if you had a chance to read this one. It's the only long-term study. It was done in Sweden. It's the only long-term study of transgender athletes. And I think they cited that in their decision making as well. So I'd be really curious. I couldn't find it, but didn't have a chance to read it, but I think that'd be interesting as well.
Yeah, well, I didn't get into that. I was looking more at the physiological effects. I think I wasn't looking at any athletic response. I was just looking at, we've got muscle mass, because that's what we're looking at here. I don't care about speed, velocity, strength.
I've just realized, I'm so sorry. I've got to turn my oven off real quick. I just realized.
Go. Bacon in the oven. Oh my God, we're going over for dinner.
Just for our listeners, we are like totally not editing this. You're going to get everything anyway.
So, Lisa, I mean, you're at a point now where you're cranking it up with your training, etc., and you've altered your nutrition and what you're doing with your life, and you've seen a massive physiological change, and you're still the same Lisa. You're still doing what you're doing.
Yeah.
So when we look at that, you just got to show that you're competing at a very, very high professional level, and we're trying to hopefully get over into the Olympia. That's the mindset. But it's taken you 20-something years of hardcore training and different nutritional protocols, and you're throwing your genetic makeup as well. When we combine all this, that's why you've become the top, let's say, 5% of Australia that are up there. It's the same with yourself, Rose. So there's not many people that are like yourself and Rose that are at that level. And then obviously the first thing, you must be on gear. It's like, for fuck's sake, how about let's look at the person, let's talk to them, let's see what they're doing, and let's see what happens,
Well, since working with you as well, Perry, understanding, and I've been assisted, and I've used bro science as well before with previous coaches that I've been with, and and yeah, look, it's had an impact, and there were side effects and what have you, and I'm open to saying that, but since coming off and and learning about really what food can actually do and the right proper training can actually do, you can get just as good results and reach your full genetic potential without having to go down this rabbit hole. And I know this is another what the fuck moment for another Friday, of being assisted and geared, like with Rose. Like, one thing that I completely respect about you, when we wanted to start working together as well with your nutrition, is you're like, I want to stay natural, and I respect that, and it's a real point to make where we're going to kind of start turning, the engines a little bit here and changing the direction of women's sport to actually make it women's sport. You don't have to be geared to get up on an Olympia stage or a pro level stage. I don't believe that now since working with yourself, Perry.
Thank you.
Yeah, you're very switched on is an understatement. But even seeing myself, like, I guess you do get to, like, I've had moments where I've thought, oh, maybe I do, like, maybe I'm just never going to progress any further than this, and I've got to be okay with that. I have my own, I guess, personal reasons as to why I choose to stay natural. I have no judgment at all for anyone that chooses not to be. And I just kind of thought, well, maybe I've hit my ceiling. And then I start working with Lisa and eating her plan. And, I know that you sort of like, talk together all the time. She's kind of mentored almost by you.
Yeah,
and,
I am,
and the difference in my body in just 14 days, it's mind-blowing. It's mind-blowing. Like, I know I'm my muscles are harder, like I'm fuller. I can feel myself I'm definitely stronger in the gym.
25 kilos on that 100 kilo squat, like,
yeah, so I guess I guess we've all maybe been a little misled. There is that kind of talk in the industry that, oh, you got to get on. You got to get on.
I'll tell you what it is, and this is what I've discovered. Like, I've looked at the reasons why, where 20 years ago when I started coaching people, the plans and nutrition and training that I did back then, and the results that I've got, which were quite good. I saw why they worked, but I've also, like I was saying to Lisa a while ago, I can also see the big gap on how I can improve, because nutrition and information keeps changing. Training facilities and ideologies keep changing. And unless you're at the forefront, and if you know how to read papers and research and chase stuff like I did for this talk tonight, you can be at that front, and then you can experiment. I mean, I was talking to Lisa yesterday about another nutritional intake that I've just changed, and I didn't experiment on myself, and the results are phenomenal. And Lisa's going to be the next one to guinea pig it.
So don't keep all this stuff to yourselves. Like,
all right, we'll bring you on board too. But you know, again, it's all natural nutrition and the timing, and you know, the what we call chrononutrition, when you're eating, what you're doing, and also, you know, the macro and micronutrient, and then going against some of the ideologies and using my own. Like, there's the paper there. It's how you read it. It's how you adapt it in your brain to get the results. And I look at it this way: if my interpretation of a specific paper means A, B, Z, D, and I then try it with people and I get the same result, that they're improving and getting bigger, then that's my interpretation. And I always use this, going back to the mechanics. You'll get two motor mechanics that will come out of the same school, learn exactly the same thing. One mechanic will look at your car and go, I think we need to change the football valve. And the other mechanic will go, right, timing belt, L filter, 3 use of the spark plug, you're right to go. Same teaching, different interpretation and different ability to put that information into play. And that's where I think I've been lucky enough where, you know, my background of being a martial artist and being involved with Olympic sports, and, you know, always been fascinated by nutrition from the age of 14, that it's led there with 35 years of experience and knowledge, and that doesn't come overnight. And I'm still learning. I'm still researching. I'm just, like I said, I did a course from America regarding blood works, and that opened up my eyes completely, where I've gone, wow, I've never heard this before in Australia. So, you know, if you don't keep evolving and changing, we'll never know. And where the sport's going to be in 10 years' time, it's going to be completely different again.
That's, you know, and that's, again, you know, obviously a topic for another conversation, but it's evolving constantly. And it's like, it's us asking us, you know, who are so passionate about the industry, Rose, it's like asking, like, what kind of impact do we want to have? What kind of trajectory do we want that sport to go in, you know, and where do we want it to go? So, you know, for me, you know, university, going back to university right now, I take my hat off to you, Perry. Maybe that was the good thing about COVID, but, you know, I would rather learn having a mentor and have a teacher. So when I've got, you know, my case studies of my clients, I'm going over to Perry and go, this is, you know, essentially what I'm doing. What do you think?
Yes.
And then throw me back a question.
But I think the beauty about that is, Lisa, that when you've asked me, and then we've addressed the protocols a little bit different to what, let's say, mainstream has, and your results have been phenomenal with every one of them, not one or two, but every one of them.
Yeah, you've got to go.
And
like,
you know it's working. When it's replicatable. Like I talk about this to people all the time. A study has to be replicated. I said the word. You know what I'm trying to say. And if it's not, and that's why I get so frustrated when I hear some people kind of, especially on this topic, and they'll cite some, you know, obscure feelings-based study on 10 people, like maybe with very specific genetic problems, you know, and then they'll kind of take that and put it all put it under the umbrella of, oh, well, all, you know, transgender people falls under this now. I think that it was really important to make the distinction between the self-IDing and the true transgender process and how that differs. That was probably a real point that I think a lot of people miss.
And look, I think what you girls have done tonight by identifying the elephant in the room, where people are sort of being, it's there, we're worried, we shouldn't be, is there an advantage, disadvantage, they shouldn't, whatever. We've taken all emotion out of it. We've done some scientific research. We've stated the figures and the fact. And it's all because you two girls have decided to trigger off the figure fraternity, not just in Australia, but worldwide, and take lead and take charge and say, you know what, this is a problem. Let's talk about it. Let's talk about it, you know, and you've done that. And, you know, you've enlisted me, and whether I've put out the right or wrong information, who knows? But at least I can back it scientifically, and I can offer the papers if people want to read it themselves. But the figures are there, and those figures are not distorted in any form or fashion. They're pure scientific facts. And the simple thing, like that grey area, we know 100%, I've repeated it so many times tonight, any transgender will always have an advantage over a female. Simple as that. No, it's
Love
such a
it.
That's
Love
the
it.
end story.
and you girls brought this up, and it's been clear. Like as of tonight, people that hear this show will know. Yep, it's a
great.
definite.
It's so
Not
fantastic.
maybe. And
I
if any
think we should
transgender is listening to this, more importantly, if any
Yeah.
transgender may have learned of what actually happens to their body, because I'm sure the normal GP won't explain any of this, and they'll think, well, I've lost muscle, I'm a bit fatter, I've got, man boobs, all this sort of stuff, got erectile dysfunction, I'm a woman. They might think that, but what they don't realize is they're still at an advantage. And I'm hoping that tonight's discussion, without any form of bias or prejudice in any way from me, that they've learned something about their own physiology and the reasons why I believe, in my opinion, that they shouldn't be in the figure sport, and that what we just saw tonight with you advertised, that there is actual transgender class available for them. That's where they should go and compete, and not say, hey, I am now identifying as a female, I've done all my testosterone therapy, done my GAT, I'm now identifying as a female. I'm really sorry to admit this to you, but you're not a female. You've still got a massive advantage. So, go into that sport, compete against other transgenders. That'll be fine. No problems at all. You can still be a female in that sport, identify as a female in that sport. But
Absolutely.
in my opinion, do not come into female figure competition. It's not right.
That's it.
I think we might I know on the show notes on YouTube and Spotify we can put the links in. Yeah, we might be able to if you want us to, Perry.
I've got about 10 or 12 papers that I pulled up, were quite intense. So but the British Medical Journal ones are probably the better ones.
Maybe just pop that one in there, and
whatever. I'll put the good ones in there so you've got them, so people can have a bit of a read. That's no problems at all.
Yeah.
And anyone that has any other questions pertaining to tonight's discussion as well, feel free to hit us up and go figure, and we'll put them out to Perry and have them addressed as well. And also any other topics that you may want to discuss, but might be a little bit embarrassed to discuss, or not sure where to go, or might think you're going to be judged. We're not judging here. We're opening up communication and judgment in a sport and discussion in a sport that we're really passionate about, and creating that platform for women like we always have wanted to do. So that's why we're enlisting the best. To come on here to talk to us, and Perry, you're going to be a regular now. So
great. It's fantastic. You're just a wealth of knowledge. You're a walking encyclopedia.
Yeah, thank you. Even though sometimes I stumble and fall, I'm not.
No, you were very. I think so concise. You were fantastic.
You had to
leave your dogs under your feet.
Yeah, I know. Once I closed the door, they were barking and carrying on. They wanted to be involved. Like, Dad,
you almost burnt down your house.
Why are you talking to these two girls and not hanging out with us?
Oh my God, my my semen is that color.
Cool. All right. Well, we're going to let you go then, and I think tonight's discussion has been hopefully educational for a number of people, and clarified the topic tonight so that people know.
It blew my mind, Perry. Honestly, it's just made it so much clearer in my mind.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Absolutely. Good. Thank you so much, Perry. All right, everyone.
Pleasure. Mission accomplished.
Awesome.